Morning all. Today let's start with Groovy script context variable. So first let me create Groovy script for this project. Add step. I'm adding Groovy script. So here I have created the project for weather, which is related to the weather visual, which I downloaded from Google. I created one test suite. Under that I have created one test case 1. In that I created one SOAP request and Groovy script. If you look into the SOAP request, this is fundamental weather, one of the operation, that is corner points, and here we have to provide sector. So I have given sector is sector 1 radar. When I ran this request, I'm able to see the SOAP response, but I'm able to see the fault code as server. That means when you look into the raw, here you can see HTTP 500 internal server error. So as we discussed earlier, when we receive HTTP status code 200, which is valid HTTP status code, and we should receive the valid response. But when we receive 500 or some more 400 300 range HTTP status code, that means something wrong in the request or something wrong at the server end. So here 500, it means internal server error. There is a problem with the server. That is the reason we are not receiving valid response, but still we received the some response saying like fault code as server and bad input sector, or sector equal to sector 1 radar, something we received. So bad input sector means maybe sector whatever data we provided may be invalid, might be the reason. But when we look into the assertions here, it is SOAP response valid. So that means here this is by default assertion. When we ran a request, there is one default assertion, that is for validate the response structure. So when we look into the response, the structure looks good. As we discussed earlier, when we discussed about SOAP, we spoke about the structure of the SOAP. It should contain envelope. In that body should be the response. Here we have the fault tag. So after fault ending, we have SOAP body ending and SOAP envelope is ending. That is the reason if it is bad input sector or bad internal server also, we receive the response, but it has proper structure. That is the reason by default our assertion has failed. But when we start validating HTTP status codes or any to check particular tag value in the response, then we can see it is failed. But when you look into the assertions, we can add one more simple assertion, that is not a property contains HTTP status. See here we have compliance status and standards. In that, if we give here we can see it's invalid HTTP status codes, valid HTTP status codes. If we give here valid means 200 is the valid one, but here it is failing. If you look into this assertion, this I have given 200, but here we are receiving valid HTTP status code failed, response status code 500 is not in accepted list of status codes. So we are receiving in 500, but we have given assertion as 200. That is the reason this assertion is failed. By default we can add this assertion for all the test requests, because by default whenever we receive the proper response, that means it is a valid status code, that is 200. But when we receive instead of 200 whatever HTTP status code we received, that is invalid status code, and our assertion will fail. So that is one point about HTTP status code. Now as of now I am removing this assertion. I removed only by default one assertion is there. Check the structure of the SOAP response, which is passed, because this one by default will come. Remaining all assertions we need to add manually, but SOAP response assertion by default it's there. So as I spoke starting, so we will discuss about context variable today. So if you look into the Groovy script, here script is invoked with log, context and test runner variables. So already log we discussed, we will use log variable to print the output in log output, log.info and log. If we run this statement, it will print in log output. It's log. Now we are discussing about context variable. First, let me start with why context variable is important. So what is context here? So wherever we create a new Groovy script, by default this editor will display, and for every Groovy script by default we can see script is invoked with log, context and test runner variables. So frequently everyone will use these three variables, log, context and test runner variable, and we can see it for every Groovy script test step. So here mainly Groovy we will use for read, parse, request and response XMLs. Main about Groovy is we will read and parse, request and response XMLs. And we have one more concept in SDLC, that XPath. What we can do using XPath, we can validate the responses. At the same time, in what context will do here, it will read, pass the request and response XMLs, and we can check the response XPaths using context as well. So we can see the examples as well. So here the syntax of context is context.expand. This is the function to handle the context. So as I said here, we can read the request and the response XMLs using context. So what is the method function should we use? Context.expand method. Using this function we can read request XMLs and response XMLs. So for example, I want to read, here I have, this is the SOAP request and this is the SOAP response I have. If I want to read this request and response, I can read it using Groovy script, that is using context variable. So here I want to read the request first. So diff request equal to context dot expand, as I showed in notepad here. This is the syntax. So context dot expand. In expand function there is a syntax, start with quotes, single quote, and we have to give dollar symbol, and we have to give curly braces, and we have to give the name of this, because our SOAP request and response in the SOAP request, right, in this test step we are reading the request and response from this test step. That means we have to give the test step name, where we want to read the request, where we want to read the response. So here I have to give the test step name. So this is test step name. As what I need, I want to read the request, so I have to give request. So these syntaxes we have to remember because it's a little bit difficult. Single quotes, and I'm closing. If we can see, if we run, what will happen? See here, I got script result SOAP request, I got information OK. You can see I will run like this, maybe anything wrong, I will run it again. Yeah, so because of the space I have received only one pop-up, but here you can see there is a pop-up displayed with the information and entire request we can see here. So script result is SOAP envelope, header, body, and corner point SOAP envelope. In that sector is sector1 header and it's closed. This is the request. It's displayed in the pop-up because only I stored the request in request variable. Entire request is storing in the request variable, but here I have not written any printing statement. That is the reason by default it has printed on pop-up. So if you want to display in the log output console, log.output, I can write request. Here it will print. Here we can see it's printed in the log. So like this same, if I want to read the response, we can do in the same way. We want the response for which step? SOAP request test step. So SOAP request, instead of request we have to keep response. Again, if I removing this one, log.info, and variable name also should change, right? Def response equal to context.expand SOAP request response. If I run this one, here you can see response fault error response is displayed in the pop-up, and when you look into the log, we can see the log.info output and request also displayed here. So in this way we can read the request and responses using context variable. Here I am printing log.info response as well. We can see both in log output console. So here we can see log envelope, this is the request and this is the response. So these are the main important concepts, because in future, like we have 100 test cases, we have executed 100 test cases, and we want to store request and responses in one folder, because in going forward, like to track if we have any issues, anyway we will keep the assertions for each response for each test case. But if you want to look into the response, we cannot come and look into each and every step open in Groovy script, right? We cannot come into the test suite and again we have to look into test case, each and every test case, and click, we have to look into the request and response. To avoid that, directly we can write a code in our framework saying like each and every test case while running, save the request and responses for each and every test case in one specific folder with the test case name. So directly all these test cases request and responses will be saved in the folder using this script. So we have to include these type of syntaxes and codes in our framework. And moving to the exports. So in exports, already when we discussed about export, there we are validated the responses using assertions exports. But here also, if I want the data for the particular element, for example, I want to see what is the fault code. Fault code is server. If I want to pick this data from the response XML using Groovy script, we can handle that too. So to look into that, we need to know some of the syntaxes and some of the namespaces. We can discuss it now. There is an important concept for context. There is an important concept under context is XML holder. I will write here XML holder. So if you I'm going to Google, and here if we search with XML holder, there is a path. I will provide this path because this is very important to know about what is XML holder in Groovy script API. This is the URL. Here you coming to here you can see the XML holder. This is the class. XML holder is class. This is the namespace we need to import to work on the XML holder. com.eyware.support.xml holder. This is the names import statement we have to use in our code to use XML holder. I will explain why we are using this namespace. This import statement in our Groovy script. I will explain. So here we have to write import com.eyware support.xml holder. So in this XML holder class, if you look into this page here, all implemented interfaces under this is map. There is another important one. And if you see here public class XML holder, this is the class. It extends the object and implements the map. And if you come down here, there are methods we can use. If you see here, get node value, get node values, modifier type is string. So here if I want the data for the particular node, as we are calling fault code is a element, attribute, string, whatever name we called it as, we can say, coming to the experts, we can say it as a node value. If I want the node value for node value of fault code, that is server. So to check what is the fault code we have in the response, so we have to use XML, what is this, get node value, get node values. If I have multiple fault codes, like I have here, I have so fault like this, I have, for example, if I have like this, then there are two envelope fault. So how in body I have two soap envelope faults, this is one and this is the another one. In that case we should use get node values, because this is an array, this is a individual one. When it is get code node value, it is a string. When it is get node values, it is string array. This one when we will use, if I have multiples of soap envelope fault, then I will use get node values. If I have only one, then I will use get node value. So I am removing this as I have received only one soap fault. So this is the one, so I should go with get node value. These are the methods under XML holder class. So we have to use based on the particular import statement. In that import statement XML holder class, what are the predefined methods are there. We need to look into the soapia.org API docs portal. There we can see we have multiple these type of classes and methods available to make our work easy. So as of now we have seen XML holder class. In that we have get node value and get node values. So let me write a simple code how to get the data of fault code. Here if you see here, till now request is stored in request variable and response is stored in response variable. I am making clear history. Now when we have an XML, first we have to look at the XML structure, what we want to read. So as already we have seen, we want to read fault code. So for this one I want to get the what is the fault code. First let's see what is the experts for fault code. We can use the path in multiple ways. We can find the expert in multiple ways. One is, if I double quotes, if I give fault code, I will get the fault code as server. And one more way, we can write from the starting, that is like soap envelope body. If I have, as I said, when we have multiple fault codes, in that case we have to handle that too, right? So in that case you can write soap envelope body. In that body what we have, soap envelope fault. In that what we have, fault code. So we can write the experts in multiple ways. First one is directly we can write / fault code. / is mandatory, because when we give / that means it will ignore all the text before whatever we have in the response. So here we can write like this, double quotes fault code, that is one way. And another way from the starting of the response, that is from soap envelope body, soap envelope fault, in that fault code. As I said, when we have multiple soap fault codes and I want to read the fault code, in that case we can write like this. If it is fault code and if I give 1 in square bracket, that means it will take the first one. For example, in fault code I have 501 here. Here if I have 502, in that case I want to read the data of fault code 501. In that case I can give fault code 1. Now I want server 502, then fault code in square brackets we can give 2. Same way here also we can add 1 for server 501 error and for 2 server 502 error. This way we can write the exports. So for example, I am taking this one, Control C, I am running this one again. So coming to the Groovy script here, so here I am writing def variable and I want fault code equal to from where I am taking this fault code from the response. Here where I stored the response using context.expand syntax, I am storing the entire response into the response variable, that is def response. So that is the response. When I declared the def, after that the name, that is nothing but a variable. So I stored the entire response into the response variable. So if I want to pick the particular element from the response, where should I apply this XML holder? On the response variable. So here I am writing response dot, what is the method we should use? Get node value. So get node value, in that here we should open the bracket and single quotes, we have to give the export fault code. Because why I remove square brackets 1 is there is only one fault code, by default anyway it will take 1 only. So in that case no need to give the square brackets and 1. Now I want to print this fault code. So if you see here, there is an error at 11, no signature of method, missing method exception, get node value is applicable for argument. Java.lang.string, so response.get node value. So I have written in single quotes fault code. I used the same name, right? I'm checking here. Double quotes fault code, and again I'm receiving the same error message here. Sorry guys, so here we are receiving there is no get node value is up, no signature of method, and this get node value is applicable for argument types java.lang.string. So here the mistake is, here we are applying, we have written on line number 11 is default fault code equal to response.get node values. We are giving like this, but the response has entire response whatever we received in SOAP request. But here what we discussed at starting, XML holder is a class. That means we have to create the object for XML holder, then only we can apply get node values on that object. So here there is a step we have to write is def. For example, I want to write response 1, I am giving, anyway response is there. So here we have to write new XML holder, in that I have to give response. So now we have to apply the get node values methods on response 1. So here diff, we need the fault code, so I am giving fault code 1, in that response 1 dot get node value. So here you can see fault code is coming from response 1 dot get node value and the export. Here we are giving the export because if you look into the Groovy script API, here if you see string get node value, string export. In get node value what we have to pass is, we have to pass string export. So that is the reason we are passing path here. So here I am running now, let's see what will happen? If I run here, you can see script result server, because we have not printed in log output, that is the reason we have received the pop-up. Now it's clear, right? Here I will write log.info fault code 1, log.info fault code is, I'm clearing this tree, and if I run this, we can see fault code is server. So simple, what we have to remember is, we have XML holder is the class, we have to create the object for that. So based on that object, we can apply get node value, get node values methods. So get node value we have written because there is only one fault code. We can write get node values when we have multiple fault codes. So here this is the important method, get node value, because we to validate the fault code. So as we discussed conditional statements, we have if condition, right? If I want to match this fault code 1 with this is the fault code 1 is actual value. If I want to validate it with the expected value, we need to store expected value in one of the variable, and we have to compare that variable and this fault code 1 variable. If it matches, it pass. If it not matches, if it is fail. Like that, we need to include conditional statements as well based on our requirement. So there is one more important one is get node values. Get node values is when we have multiple elements, its return types is array. So if it is array, we can using for loop or for each loop, while loop, we can retrieve the data from the response XMLs. And another important concept here is in context, that is set property and get property. So what is the use of these two is, here I am writing like context dot set property. This one set property has key and value pair. For example, I want to store the name here, name, and here I am giving Kumar. So name is the key and value is, name is the key and Kumar is the value, key pair value. We can name it as key and this is value. If I run this, nothing will print, but what it will do is, this one context dot set property, we have set the properties to the context, we can retrieve the data values using get property method. For example, here itself we can write, we can see what will happen, get property, and I can write name. If you see here, script result Kumar is displayed because context dot get property name, because to get the value from the context, we will use the context dot get property. In name, what is stored? Kumar is stored. That is the reason Kumar is displayed here. So this is very important one, because for example, if we have saved some names in using set property and I want to retrieve it in next step, that means if I create one more test step, I am adding add step and Groovy script here. Here you see I am giving Groovy script 2 here, and if I want to retrieve the data from here, so here if I write get property and name, if I run this, nothing will happen because I am running the individual step. But when I run the entire steps like this, because when I run the test case 1, it will execute step by step. First it will be execute SOAP request, it will be SOAP request Groovy script, after that Groovy script 2. When we execute test case level, then it will work and it will return the result is Kumar, because Groovy script 2 is executing after Groovy script. That means context.set property is working and Kumar is storing in key name, so and it is displaying in Groovy script 2. This is one more important concept, set property and get property. We will use it in framework level. And another one more thing we need to discuss here is, here when I run this script we are receiving fault code as server. So that means this fault code element is present in the response XML. That is the reason we are able to see the fault code. For example, that XPath is not available. What will happen? Control C, and here fault code 1 is printing. But if that XPath is not present, what will happen? We can see I am giving fault code 1 here. So this path is not available in response XML. If I run this, we have received an error at line 16, fault code 1, the current scope already contains a variable of name fault code 1. See line 16, here also fault code 1 is there, here also fault code 1 is there. That is the reason we received the error. But if you look into the error pop-up, easily it will be understandable. So no need to get confused. Here if you read clearly fault code 1 at line 16 and column 5, and at the same time if you read carefully, we can see here fault code 1, div fault code 1, and this current scope already contains a variable of the name fault code 1. So fault code 1 already there, that is the reason we are receiving. Coming to here, change it, and here I am giving XPath fault code 1, but correct one is fault code. So let's see what will happen in this case. See, it has executed, but we have not received any error. Here fault code is server is printed for this one, and this one no error is displayed, but it has executed. Now let's see what will there in fault code 2. Log.info fault code 2. So for this one I will give, to avoid the confusion, I am giving fault code 2. Now we can see what is printing. See, I have executed here. We can see the request, response, and fault code is server correct. Another one is fault code 2 is null. That means whenever their element, that XPath is not available in the response, it will not throw any error, but it will give the message saying null. So because that XPath couldn't find, that is the reason there will be no data in that XPath. That is the reason it is receiving null. So there in real time there are set of the elements may be display, may be come into the response or may not come, depends on the requirement. So in that case, if that particular element is exist in the response or if it does not exist in the response, in that case we can use, we should remember that if that element is not present, we will receive null. If the element is present, it will return either a value, we can return a value based on our requirement, and we can write the code how we want. This is another important top concept in context variable. So there is one more important statement for context is, this context variable is common for all steps in the test case, because this context scope is for this test case 1. If I create another test case, new test case, that is test case 2, and in test case 2 if I create one more test step, if I add test step Groovy script, and here if I write context, here we have anyway, right, context.get property name, control C, and if control V, if I run here, nothing is happening. So this scope of this context is only for the one test case. So that is the reason we have giving, we are giving the statement saying context is common for all the steps in a test case. That means this context scope is for this test case 1 only. Context scope for test case 2 is only for test case 2 test steps only. So that is it from context. So let's explain what we discussed one more time. So context is mainly used for read and pass the request XML and response XMLs, and we can we can read the elements data from the responses using XML holder class. In XML holder class we have two main methods, that is get node value and get node values. When we have only single tag, then we will go with XML get node value. When we have only single element, and there is another method get node values when we have multiple elements, so we can say multiple tags with same name. This return type is array. For this is only one single value, that means we can by default we can save it to diff variable, single variable. So another one is we look into the when XPath is not present in the response XML, then it will return the null value. And after that we discussed about what is set property and what is the get property. All these concepts we will use in framework level. So in further class we can look into the more depth of the Groovy script concepts, because till now we have looked into the conditional statements and looping statements, what is class, what is objects, different string methods. Now we discussed about context variable, which is very important, and going forward we can look into the test runner variables and what are the different methods. Like today we discussed about XML holder class and methods under XML holder class. Like this, what are the different classes and methods we have predefined methods we have, and how it will be useful in framework design. We can discuss all the concepts in further classes. Thank you all. Thank you.